This video is special to me for a few reasons. First, Shiny Meloetta, a mythical Pokemon that's been out of reach for over a decade of my life, is finally obtainable. Since Meloetta's first debut, it's been locked behind events and was impossible to shiny hunt. Now, after all these years, I finally have a chance to catch one, and I am not letting that slip by. Second, this project combines two of my biggest creative passions, my love for Pokemon and my growing love for music. As I work on learning how to play the piano, this Meloetta hunt felt like a perfect opportunity to learn one of my favorite songs in the Pokemon franchise. On top of that, this video kicks off my journey to catch every single shiny legendary Pokemon. It's a huge challenge, and I know that not all of them are available yet, but claiming shiny Meloetta here in this video is a very important first step for me. Finally, this video is a chance to talk about one of the hardest moments in my Pokemon journey. After accidentally deleting over 500 Pokemon from my living Pokédex, I was devastated, and the idea of rebuilding it felt so overwhelming. This shiny Meloetta quest gave me the motivation I needed to start again, to rebuild what I lost, and to transform that setback into something positive. So in this video, I'll share why this shiny Meloetta means so much to me, the painful story of losing my Pokédex, and the journey that's helping me reclaim everything I lost. I'll also dive into a couple tips and tricks that made it possible for me to complete this challenge. I hope you enjoy. Meloetta is a mythical Pokemon that appeared in Generation 5 back in 2012. Over a decade ago. To understand why finally be able to catch it in-game now is such a big deal, you have to understand that in the past it was only available through limited in-person events. Meloetta was not the only Pokemon like this, and in most cases if you wanted a mythical Pokemon you actually had to go outside, interact with human beings, and touch grass, which was a pretty intimidating concept for my younger self. It wasn't just the social challenges either. Most of the time I didn't even know these events existed until it was way too late. The best way that I had to stay in touch was either the TV or our family computer, and both of those options just weren't going to cut it. Just as an example, you probably knew within a few hours that Game Freak, the developers of Pokemon, had a huge data leak. You also probably knew pretty quickly that there was a shiny Meloetta available. By the way, do you think it's a coincidence that shiny Meloetta was announced shortly after the data breach? Do you think they panicked and released a shiny mythical Pokemon that was previously unobtainable just to distract us all from the leaked information? If so, it definitely worked for me because I want nothing to do with that Typhlosion nonsense. I just want to get my hands on this Pokemon. To be fair, Meloetta was already catchable in-game when the Indigo Disc DLC was released for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. For the first time ever, this mythical Pokemon was available in a main series game with no special or time-sensitive events. After 12 years, I was finally able to get my own Meloetta. Granted, you did have to pay for the DLC, but it was cool nonetheless. An annoying catch of that deal was that just like every other legendary in Scarlet and Violet, Meloetta was shiny locked. Why Game Freak keeps shiny locking legendaries is anyone's guess. But for Meloetta's particular case, there is hope. On October 18th in 2024, Pokemon Home introduced rewards for completing specific Pokedexes. And if you finish the Paldea, Kitakami, and Blueberry Pokedexes, you can receive a shiny Meloetta. For all the reasons I explained before, this is monumental. For the first time, we can get a shiny version of this Pokemon, and that's worth celebrating. At this point, I knew I had to complete this challenge and claim this shiny for my collection. Conveniently, I was already ahead on this task. I had already completed the Central Scarlet and Violet Dex ages ago for the shiny charm. Since if you didn't know, I do hunt shiny Pokemon. I finished the other two dexes because I'm a completionist. Admittedly, I finished the Blueberry Pokedex mainly for that Mark charm, which I desperately need for a video I'm working on now in the background. But honestly, I didn't care too much about that glimmering charred reward for completing Kitakami's Pokedex. I was much more interested in that shiny badge rather than more Terror Shards. That said, imagine my confusion when I went into Pokemon Home and I didn't get my shiny Meloetta. What's going on? I caught every single Pokemon across the 3 Pokedexes. I should be set, right? Where's my shiny Miku? For a moment, I thought it was a glitch. Maybe all the people logging in at once to claim their shiny mythical had overloaded the Pokemon Home servers or something. In a state of confusion, I did some digging online to find answers. And the only thing I found online was an article telling me something I did not want to hear. Turns out getting Meloetta isn't that simple. To get the shiny, I needed to complete all 3 Pokedexes using only Pokemon caught directly from Scarlet and Violet. The unfortunate part for me is that many of the Pokemon I used came from past games. Those don't count. If I want to get my hands on Meloetta, I'll have to reclaim a lot of Pokemon. Again, at first, realizing I had to re-catch Pokemon was a huge letdown. This was a task I've already completed. It felt like a waste of time and just busy work. Sure, this is a requirement for shiny Meloetta, but is it really worth the hassle? Well, a lot of what I said would have been the case if I actually still had my Pokedex. If you've stuck with me this far, first off, thank you. I really do appreciate you. But also, you're probably wondering where the lost Pokedex part of this story comes in. Well, you made it this far, so here's the quick summary. I deleted it. A while ago, I accidentally deleted about 500 Pokemon from my living Pokedex. Yeah, that's my worst nightmare come true. Years, no, decades of work gone in one instant. I spent thousands of hours collecting one of every Pokemon in a journey that spanned a decade of real life and generations of consoles and Pokemon games, only to delete them accidentally. It's an embarrassing and sad thing to say out loud, but it happened. It is by far the worst thing I've ever done in my Pokemon career. Here's how it happened. As a bit of background on the Nintendo Switch, you can create multiple profiles, which lets you start new playthroughs of games without overwriting your main save file's game data. A neat benefit of this is that you can transfer Pokemon caught in each separate profile back to a single Pokemon Home account. There are a few times you would want to use this. You can catch additional Pokemon that only appear once in a playthrough, you can set up shiny hunts for legendaries in games like Sword and Shield, and you can create profiles for special challenges, like what I did with my shiny Nuzlocke of Legends Arceus. When I first learned about this trick, I was a bit skeptical, so I wanted to do a bit of testing to see if it actually worked. I started by making the alt account, made a new game in Scarlet, plowed through the endless hours of cutscene at the beginning of that game, and I finished off the test by transferring about 500 Pokemon from my living dex in Home to this test profile. I wanted to test the transfer capabilities of Pokemon Home as well as see if I could fill up the Pokédex and grab the shiny charm really quick. Turns out you can do all that, and I was satisfied. In celebration, and honestly in a bit of a rush, I quickly wrote off my testing as a success and deleted my fresh profile. At the time, I really didn't have a goal for that new profile. I just wanted to ensure that it worked before I did anything else. Something I do to save myself confusion later is just delete something if I don't have a goal for it. I wanted that account gone, and I knew that if I ever wanted to start a second playthrough, I had a method I could use. Did you catch my mistake? You probably did, but for some reason at the time I just completely overlooked it. Before deleting that test profile, I never transferred my Pokemon back into Pokemon Home. Simply put, it is the silliest thing I have ever done. That living Pokédex that I so casually deleted had my original party members from games like Black and White and X and Y. It's not just the large quantity of Pokemon that I lost, it was the fact that this collection had some seriously nostalgic Pokemon in it. I won't lie, I was genuinely depressed for about a week. I had next to no motivation to play Pokemon after the event. I was defeated, and the idea of repairing my living dex was so daunting. Having to redo something because of a silly mistake is the worst. But maybe you can see now why this shiny Meloetta quest has been such a blessing for me. This single event is the motivation I need to recover everything I've lost, and it's reminded me to keep my head up about the whole situation. I had the golden opportunity to see my setback as a brand new adventure, because nearly all the Pokemon I lost can be reclaimed in Scarlet and Violet. At the time of the announcement, I had to claim 33 Pokemon for the Paldea Dex, 36 for the Kitakami Pokédex, and 92 for the Blueberry Pokédex. That Paldea Dex is pretty solid because I already started reclaiming some living Dex members before this Meloetta reward was announced. The other Dexes need a lot of work though. So to keep myself sane and get some help along the way, I streamed my first few hours on the journey. By the way, I stream Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. Central here on YouTube. So subscribe to see those show up on your feed and feel free to hang out. If you've made it this far, you seem to enjoy my videos enough, so you should probably hit that like button while you're down there too. Back to the task at hand, there was some exciting things I realized as well as rediscovered about completing Pokedexes in these games. The first of which is that I love Quick Balls. Something about hucking it at the start of an encounter and banking on the fact that it's going to succeed is pretty addictive. Sure, it might not be the flashiest Pokeball, but it gets the job done. Sue me if you want, but I'm one of those guys that uses it for shiny Pokemon too. It's just such a satisfying Pokeball to use, and you cannot beat the reliability. Something noteworthy too about the Quick Balls in Scarlet and Violet is that you can use them multiple times. Even the mighty Quick Ball can fail sometimes, and if you want to retry without battling, you can. You can just run away in this game without the Pokemon disappearing, so you can just keep re-encountering the Pokemon to get as many turn 1 Quick Ball chances as you want. Let me know what you think about the Quick Ball too, I cannot be the only one that loves it. On the topic of the living dex, I want to point out that many of the Pokemon we need to obtain are much more difficult than the average. There are a lot of trait evolutions, version exclusives, or Pokemon with tricky evolution requirements. I will say though that Scarlet and Violet has made catching these Pokemon much easier than they were to obtain in past games. Take Salazzle for example. In Sun and Moon, I had to grind capturing Salandit until I found a female, and only then could I evolve it into the rare Salazzle. In this game, you can find Salazzle in the wild, straight up. There are several fixed spawn locations reserved for Pokemon just like this that used to be so hard to obtain. In a lot of cases, instead of struggling to do an evolution or grinding levels to evolve a Pokemon, you can just waltz up to what you want, throw a Quick Ball, and be done. A variant of this fixed spawn strategy is to use the fixed Terra Pokemon too that are spread out throughout the region. These are again guaranteed spots to find what used to be harder to obtain Pokemon. I managed to find Pokemon like Haxorus and Hitmontop this way, and boy oh boy is that easier than it used to be to get Hitmontop. Sticking with the Terra theme, I wanted to touch on Terra Raids. These are your best friends for filling in some of those harder Pokedex entries. As an example, you could spend the time to collect a few dozen, what are they called, twigs? Galceria twigs? You could spend the time to collect a few dozen twigs to craft the wreath and cuff items that you need to evolve Slowpoke, or you could just find these Pokemon in Terra Raids and skip that process entirely. I'm in a lucky spot since I've played the game for hundreds of hours. I actually have these items, but if you don't, you can just reset for Terra Raids until you find the Pokemon you need. It really doesn't take that long. Terra Raids are also the method I used for obtaining some trait evolution Pokemon. Pokemon like Cantonian Slowking, Kingdra, and Meloetta are all found here, and I managed to capture mine using this method. Just check every so often while you're working on something else, and you are bound to see something that you need. Terra Raids also work for version exclusive too. Breeding was another method I found myself using a lot for a few reasons. First, it's a way to quickly obtain the base Pokemon in any given family, but it could be used to convert Pokemon, in a sense. Say I caught a Pokemon in a different game, like Sword and Shield. It won't count for Meloetta, but if I transfer it into Scarlet and Violet through home, breed it with a Ditto, then the hatched Pokemon would count as the Pokemon obtained in Scarlet and Violet. I use this for a lot of my Pokemon, and I would recommend you do the same if you can. Also, as a side note, has SQ always been this huge? I just assumed this Pokemon was small, but my word is he a thick boy. No offense to him. Lastly, it's the part of the video where I flex a bit. One of the coolest things I realized I could do was use some of my shiny Pokemon to complete dex entries. In the time since the incident, I've done hundreds of hours of shiny hunting, and a lot of these were exactly what I needed. I just never transferred them into Pokemon Home. For example, I had a shiny Gothitelle, Sassy, from my shiny lock of the Blueberry Academy DLC. She didn't make it through the run, but her death was not in vain. I also had Pokemon like Braviary, Vullaby, and Mandibuzz ready to go because I had their shinies. By the way, you should watch that video, it's one of my favorite projects ever. On the same topic of shinies, I tried to avoid this last part because I didn't want to spoil anything, but I could not think of a way around it. The reality is that a huge chunk of Pokemon I need for the Blueberry Pokédexes are starters, and their evolutions. I wanted to avoid spoiling this before the video came out, but I already captured a lot of shiny starter Pokemon, and these are perfect for completing the dex. Granted, I don't have all of them yet, so I did have to hunt for a few starters the old-fashioned way, but it's kind of a big flex to have like 20 starter Pokemon to finish this thing. All those tips and tricks across about 20 hours got me everything I needed except for 2 Pokemon. The last hurdle that I had to get over was obtaining the legendary Paradox Pokemon available at the end of the games, Iron Boulder and Iron Crown. I'll be honest, I was not ready to buy a new copy of Violet and start a brand new game, so I went the trading route. There are a couple options here. The first is to use Discord, and Game 8 is my favorite Discord server. Another option that's one of my favorites too is using trade codes. These are link codes specifically for trades like this. If you want to trade box legendaries or version exclusives, there is a code somewhere for it. And if you type it in, chances are you will meet someone who is trading for exactly what you need. In my case, I had to find codes where I could trade Iron Boulder and Iron Crown for Raging Bolt and Gouging Fire. With that, that's pretty much everything I did in order to get every single Pokemon. All that was left to do is transfer everything into home and claim my reward. Overall, this journey was super nostalgic and refreshing for me. I had way more fun than I thought I would. Filling the Pokédex out again felt like returning to the basics in a way, and this was a really unique shiny hunt that was a great change of pace. I know this video is a bit different from my normal challenges, but this is a really important step for me towards that every shiny legendary challenge. This was also an important video for me to share some of my thoughts and stories I really haven't had a chance to yet. So let me know if you like this style of video, but do stay tuned for more of my normal stuff in the future. I've got a lot more challenging shiny hunts cooking and some other videos as well. Hope you have a great day.